Well, everybody, welcome back. We're going to talk a little Python today. And one of the things I'd like to do is go through a great data type called the list. And we're going to use this to create a menu of options, and we're going to let Python pick at random. I'm going to use the suit of cards as my example. So what you're going to see on this program is it's very straightforward. The first thing you'll notice that when I run the program I have, that Python, my script is going to pick at random one of the suits, and in this case it picks spades. Then I will show you not only how to do that, but how to allow the user to pick an option. So taking a list of different suits, we can actually create a little menu right here and allow the user to pick by number one of these options. So if we want to pick clubs, we type in the number 1 and hit enter, and it'll say you pick clubs. Now, if I run this again, you will see that Python's going to pick another at random suit. And then we can pick spades, for example, and you pick spades. Okay, so let's do that. We're just going to use idle. We're going to create a new file. And I'm going to call this one, I think the name I was calling for this one is list example. So I'll call it list example. I'm trying to learn how to spell. .py. And then on here, it's just going to be a demonstration of some handy things you can do with the list. Okay, first of all, we need to import our random. We're going to use random because we want to randomly choose items. Oops, import statements. I'm having coding issues today. Import random. We want the computer to be able to pick random items. Now, we're going to do a thing called a constant. A constant is a variable that doesn't change its value. Okay? So like variables such as pi and gravity and other kinds of constants you might see in math, in programming, our constant, we're going to use one for the suits for a suit of cards. So the convention on a constant is that the variable name should be all uppercase. We do that so that it's a clear indication that we do not intend to change its value. Okay, so that's a constant. Suits. Now, if you're going to make a list, you enclose your list inside of brackets like so. Okay? And then inside, everything you want in your list, by the way, a list can have any kind of data type inside. You can stick variables in a list. You can stick literal values in a list. You can stick numbers. You can stick like integers. You can stick floats. You can stick strings. You can mix them up. In our case, we're going to do strings. Spades. Clubs. We'll get those out of the way. Hearts. And diamonds. Okay. So here is our constant. Okay. And this is a list. Okay. A list of card suits. Okay. Now, what can we do with this list? Let me show you a couple cool little techniques we can do when we have a list. Don't forget to save your program. I'm going to save mine real quick. Okay, first thing I want you to do once you run it, test this out. Type F5 to run it. And you're not going to see anything right now. So let's just type out suits. Okay, so when you run it in the shell, you can see suits. We have a list of items. What we can do, if we want to access just one of these, we do a thing called indexing. We call this indexing, and every item in the list has its own position. And by using these little brackets, we can pick out an item. So if we wanted to do spades, we'd put 0. And we do that because, remember, in computer science, we start counting at 0. That's our first digit. So we call that zero-based indexing. And what we're saying here is the 0 position is the first position, and that is spades. And if we put in, for example, 1, it gives us the second one, which is clubs. And so as long as you're putting numbers that match this particular data type, all right, we're okay. So I'll put 3 on here. And notice there are 4 items in suits. And you will note that 0 is the first and 3 is the last. It's the 4th. If we were to try to put a 4th position in here, we get an error. In fact, the error is an index error because it's an error in indexing. We call that index. And the problem with this is we're out of range because there is nothing in the 4th position, actually in this case the 5th position. Now, another thing we can do with lists, watch this, len suits, okay? Hit enter, and we get the answer is 4. Anyone want to take a guess as to what len does as a function? Basically, it tells us how many items are in the list. It's the length of suits, and in this case, it's 4. So we're saying we have 4 items in here. Now, this is a really handy function because with this integer 4, guess what we can do? First of all, I'm going to go ahead and write this other little function here you might be interested in. It's called range. I'm going to give the number 4 in range. And you'll note what it does is it creates a 0 and a 4 beginning and end. If we were to do, for example, random.randrange, and we gave it the number 4, it would randomly choose one of the numbers. Okay? If we run it multiple times, every time we run it, we will find it's a possibly different number. Now, one of the things about randrange, and I think I've gone over this with my class before, is that randrange could produce the number 0, but it could never produce the number 4. It would be 0 to 3. And the reason why is it takes this number and it produces a random choice between 0 and the number leading up there. In other words, 4 possible outcomes starting with 0, the 4th one being 3 that we see here. If we run it a few more times, eventually we'll get an example where it produces the number 0. Well, I would hope it would. There we go. That's a lot of random running before we got it. Okay, with that in mind, we can now use this length, and we can use random to choose a random position. So that's what we're going to do next. So let's go back to our code here. Okay. There's suits. What we're going to do is pick a random index position. Okay? We're going to do pick equals random.randrange. And now what we're going to put inside is we're going to put len of suits. Okay? And so what that pick does is that picks a random number that will coincide with one of the index positions. Okay? Now, let's choose a suit. Use pick to select the suit. So we're going to put suit, little s, all lowercase, equals suits, index position, pick. And then finally, we're going to output what we did. Hold on a second. All right, so now we go back here. We're going to print the output. The computer picked. Now we're going to do this. We're going to do our little right here, format, and then we're going to use suit. And we need a closing parenthesis. Now let me enter a few times to bring that up. So the computer picked, and then whatever we put here, it's whatever the variable in format will get inserted there. And so that's how we're going to do it. Let's go ahead and run it and see what the computer picks. Computer picked clubs. Okay, if we run it again, it'll pick something else, diamonds. And so as long as we're using length of suits, we're using randrange, this allows us to randomly choose one of those numbers. Well, and the same thing that did this is going to allow us to have the user actually select a number. So in the next installment of this video here, what we're going to do is we're going to use that suits We're going to display it in a nice, easy-to-read format and give the user a way of picking one of the numbers. I'm going to improve the program you saw earlier. I'm going to make it so the user could actually pick a 1, 2, 3, or 4, and then we will do what we need to do to make sure it doesn't crash the program. So stay tuned on the video for that.